boy did not have the time to stay. He just rushed on, so that he could manage to see as much as possible before it would all vanish again. The high wall ran all around the city and shut it in, as a hedge shuts in a field. He saw it at the end of every street gable ornamented and crenellated. On the top of the wall walked warriors in shining armour, and when he had run from one end of the city to the other, he came to still another gate in the wall. Outside of this lay the sea and harbour. The boy saw old time ships, with rowing benches straight across, and high structures fore and aft. Some lay and took on cargo; others were just casting anchor. Carriers and merchants hurried around each other. All over it was life and bustle. But not even here did he seem to have the time to linger. He rushed into the city again. And now he came up to the big square. There stood the cathedral with its three high towers and deep vaulted arches filled with images. The walls had been so highly decorated by sculptors that there was not a stone without its own special ornamentation. And what a magnificent display of gilded crosses and gold trimmed altars and priests in gold vestments shimmered through the open gate. Directly opposite the church there was a house with a notched roof and a single slender sky high tower. That was probably the courthouse. And between the courthouse and the cathedral, all around the square, stood the beautiful gabled houses with their multiplicity of adornments. The boy had run himself both warm and tired. He thought that now he had seen the most remarkable things, and therefore he began to walk more leisurely. The street which he had turned into now was surely the one where the inhabitants purchased their fine clothing. He saw crowds of people standing before the little stalls, where the merchants spread brocades, stiff satins, heavy gold cloth, shimmery velvet, delicate veiling, and laces as sheer as a spider's web. Before, when the boy ran so fast, no one had paid any attention to him. The people must have thought that it was only a little gray rat that darted by them. But now, when he walked down the street, very slowly, one of the salesmen caught sight of him and began to beckon to him. At first the boy was uneasy and wanted to hurry out of the way, but the salesman only beckoned and smiled and spread out on the counters a lovely piece of satin damask, as if he wanted to tempt him. The boy shook his head. "I will never be so rich that I can buy even a metre of that cloth," thought he. But now they had caught sight of him in every stall, all along the street. Wherever he looked stood a salesman and beckoned to him. They left their costly wares and thought only of him. He saw how they hurried into the most hidden corner of the stall to fetch the best that they had to sell, and how their hands trembled with eagerness and haste as they laid it upon the counter. When the boy continued to go on, one of the merchants jumped over the counter, caught hold of him, and spread before him silver cloth and woven tapestries which shone with brilliant colours. The boy couldn't do anything but laugh at him. The salesman certainly must understand that a poor little creature like him couldn't buy such things. He stood still and held out his two empty hands, so they would understand that he had nothing and let him go in peace. But the merchant raised a finger, and nodded and pushed the whole pile of beautiful things over to him. "Can he mean that he will sell all this for a gold piece?" wondered the boy. The merchant brought out a tiny, worn and poor coin, the smallest that one could see, and showed it to him. And he was so eager to sell that he increased his pile with a pair of large, heavy silver goblets. Then the boy began to dig down in his pockets. He knew, of course, that he didn't possess a single coin, but he couldn't help feeling for it. All the other merchants stood still and tried to see how the sale would come off. and when they observed that the boy began to search in his pockets, they flung themselves over the counters, filled their hands full of gold and silver ornaments, and offered them to him. And they all showed him that what they asked in payment was just one little penny. But the boy turned both vest and breeches pockets inside out, so they should see that he owned nothing. Then tears filled the eyes of all these regal merchants, who were so much richer than he. At last he was moved because they looked so distressed, and he pondered if he could not in some way help them. And then he happened to think of the rusty coin which he had but lately seen on the strand. He started to run down the street, and luck was with him, so that he came to the self same gate which he had happened upon first. He dashed through it, and commenced to search for the little green copper penny which lay on the strand a while ago. He found it too, very promptly. But when he had picked it up, and wanted to run back to the city with it, he saw only the sea before him. No city wall, no gate, no sentinels, no streets, no houses could now be seen only the sea. The boy couldn't help that the tears came to his eyes. He had believed in the beginning that that which he saw was nothing but an hallucination, but this he had already forgotten. He only thought about how pretty everything was. He felt a genuine, deep sorrow because the city had vanished. That moment Herr Ermenrich awoke and came up to him. But he didn't hear him, and the stork had to poke the boy with his bill to attract attention to himself. "I believe that you stand here and sleep just as I do," said Herr Ermenrich. "Oh, Herr Ermenrich," said the boy, "what was that city which stood here just now?" "Have you seen a city?" said the stork. "You have slept and dreamt, as I say." "No, I have not dreamt," said Thumbietot, and he told the stork all that he had experienced. Then Herr Ermenrich said: "For my part, Thumbietot, I believe that you fell asleep here on the strand and dreamt all this. But I will not conceal from you that Bataki, the raven, who is the most learned of all birds, once told me that in former times there was a city on this shore, called Vineta. It was so rich and so fortunate that no city has ever been more glorious, but its inhabitants unluckily gave themselves up to arrogance and love of display. As a punishment for this, says Bataki, the city of Vineta was overtaken by a flood and sank into the sea. But its inhabitants cannot die, neither is their city destroyed. And one night in every 100 years it rises in all its splendour up from the sea, and remains on the surface just 1 hour." "Yes, it must be so," said Thumbietot, "for this I have seen." "But when the hour is up, it sinks again into the sea, if during that time no merchant in Vineta has sold anything to a single living creature. If you, Thumbietot, only had had an ever so tiny coin to pay the merchants, Vineta might have remained up here on the shore, and its people could have lived and died like other human beings." "Herr Ermenrich," said the boy, "now I understand why you came and fetched me in the middle of the night. It was because you believed that I should be able to save the old city. I am so sorry I didn't turn out as you wished, Herr Ermenrich." He covered his face with his hands and wept. It wasn't easy to say which one looked the more disconsolate, the boy or Herr Ermenrich. The Living City, Monday, April 11th. On the afternoon of Easter Monday the wild geese and Thumbietot were on the wing. They travelled over Gottland.